Welcome everyone to our today's seminar. Okay, now today, before we invite our presenter, Tara Astia, to give us the talk today, I would like to give you some, house rules for today's webinar. As we all know that the whole session will be recorded, except the QA, and your voice and your face will not be recorded. So during the presentation, make sure that you're not recording by yourself or taking photos, of this session. So you will be muted during the presentation, so please stay muted until we come to the QA session. So if you have any questions or comments, you can take a note or write down in the chat room during the presentation. We'll definitely will give you a chance to, to ask your raise your questions or your comments. So during the Q&A session, please raise your hand. So we will call your names. So make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. So the questions received in the chat room will be taken at the Q&A time. You can either, if you don't want to be recorded to show your face, you can have your video on, or you turn your video off, that's fine. But during our QA session, we encourage everyone, to show your faces for our, to see each other, and that's for the overall well-being, for all of us. We're glad to see your faces. Next slide. Okay. So today's webinar is co-hosted by 3 organizations. They are the Momiji Healthcare Society, Japanese Social Services, and the Ehan Center for Geriatric Care. So we would like to have the staff from each organization to introduce their agency. So the first, Momiji Healthcare Society, will have Chi.
Hi everyone, my name is Chie. I am a client intervention worker at Momiji Healthcare Society. So Momiji is a nonprofit supportive housing in Scarborough, and we are serving seniors and caregivers in English and Japanese. We have virtual and in-person programs for seniors and caregivers in community, and also for the tenants in Momiji. We finally got outbreak lifted, so we're just restarting all those programs again. So if you have any program that interest of you, then please let us know so we can register you to it. And we are still going on with the Toriichi Bento fundraising. So if you're interested in, please order by August 19 noon for receiving it on the August 24 afternoon. You have to pick it up from Momiji, but it's a really yummy bento, and it will be great for you and helping us Momiji as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Gia, for introduction. Next, let's have Rumiko from Japanese Social Services. Rumiko.
Hey, thank you, Angela. So my name is Rumiko from Japanese Social Services. So Japanese Social Services is a non-profit agency that provides counseling and programs in both English and Japanese. So we are located in the 2nd floor of Japanese Canadian Cultural Center, but currently providing service mostly remotely. So you can reach us by phone or email. And every month we are hosting this e-learning seminar on 2nd and 4th Wednesday. And we're posting the detail on our website. And we also have social programs such as craft club, singing club, and online yoga club. So if anyone interested, please check our website, JSS.ca, for more information and register. Thank you.
Thanks, Rumiko. So next, my name is Angela, the social worker from Ehan Center for Geriatric Care. Ehan Center is also a nonprofit organization. We're providing community support services, home support services, long-term care home service, and hospice services. So our main population is Chinese community and also South Asian communities. Our current service, if you would like to know more about our services, you can call the number on the screen or go to our website for more details. And we do have caregiver support services, and we do offer online webinars. So you can go to this website for more details. Thanks. Now today, we are happy to have Tara there from the Arthritis Society to give us a presentation about the tips living with arthritis. Tara, let's have you.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name's Tara. I'm one of the occupational therapists with the Arthritis Society. And today we're going to be talking about tips for living with osteoarthritis. So Angela, it's okay if I share my screen now? Yeah. Okay, great. So let me just do this. Perfect. And I'm going to share screen one. Okay. And okay, everyone can see. Let's just wait here. We'll make sure that everyone can see my screen. Okay. Yeah, great. Okay. So welcome, everybody. I come from an organization called the Arthritis Society, and we are funded by the Ontario government. So anybody is able to access our services. We have lots of different workshops, groups, and individual one-to-one services. As long as you have a valid OHIP card or Ontario Health card, you can access our services. So we can chat about that at the end as well. And we have a strong mission. We want to continue to invest in research. We want to advocate for people living with arthritis. We know it affects so many millions of us. And so we want to hopefully come up with the best ideas possible so we can feel supported and empowered to manage this disease. So self-management is an important concept in managing any chronic disease, which arthritis is. So self-management is the ability to have the skills, the confidence, and the ability to manage this on a regular basis. So what we mean is in a year, maybe in total, we see our family doctors, maybe a total is up to an hour. Maybe we see a specialist for an hour. Maybe we see a combination of physiotherapy, chiropractor. However, we are on our own for 8,748 hours approximately. So this just speaks to it's what we do on our own time that is going to make the most impactful difference in our care and in our pain. So it's actually shown those who feel they have better self-management, it decreases pain by about 20%. So it's very, very significant. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to spend a little bit of time educating you on what arthritis is. Then we're going to talk about strategies to manage pain and stiffness. And then we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about our knees, our hips, and our hands, and just some generic tips for that as well. Okay. So over 6 million Canadians are affected by some form of arthritis. So that's about 20% of our population, and that number keeps growing. There are over actually 100 different types of arthritis, but the two major categories are inflammatory arthritis and degenerative arthritis, which is known as osteoarthritis. So with an inflammatory type of arthritis, this might also be termed rheumatoid arthritis. So it's a little bit different. And this is where the body actually is attacking itself, specifically something called the synovium, which is the joint lining, and it causes inflammation. So if it's left untreated, this results in a lot of joint damage and deformities. So these orange circles here, they represent the joints most commonly impacted with an inflammatory type of arthritis. And typically, if you have been diagnosed with some sort of inflammatory arthritis, whether it's a rheumatoid arthritis, you usually are on some form of disease-modifying medication. People with rheumatoid arthritis can have osteoarthritic changes as well, so they can kind of mirror each other. And the blue squares represent the joints most commonly impacted by osteoarthritis. These are usually our weight-bearing joints. So typically things like our knees, our hips, our lower back, our neck, our shoulders, the base of the thumb, and some of the tip hand joints, and that first big toe as well. Osteoarthritis is much more common than inflammatory arthritis. So we're going to sort of be focusing more on that today. So what are the symptoms of arthritis? These are obviously just a few, but the changes in the joint can result in some of these physical symptoms. So pain, a lot of stiffness, crepitus. Crepitus is that sound we hear when we bend our knees and we hear a creak, 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 or cracking. That's called crepitus. Perhaps there's a loss of movement or even a loss of confidence in the joint. So our own ability not to trust how we're moving around. And then, of course, a lot of functional limitations that might come from this. So perhaps this is impacting how we're working, how we go about our day-to-day activities with cleaning or cooking, and even our social activities. So in addition, arthritis can affect more than just your joints. So when I say this, I want you to think about how arthritis makes you feel emotionally, because there's a huge emotional impact when we can't do the things that we want to do. So we know that this can affect our emotions sometimes just based on frustration, right? If we always did something at a certain speed or at a certain level and suddenly things are taking us a little bit longer to do, or we can't do it at the same effect, that can cause, depression and a lot of anger, sometimes even anxiety, a little bit of fearing the future of what's to come in with our joints. Perhaps there's been some body image changes too, right? If we look at our hands and they're suddenly curving, a little bit of deformity, sometimes that is an issue as well. And then also role changes. So if you've been, always the homemaker, the person doing some of these, cooking for large holiday dinners and meals, overusing our hands during the holidays, maybe our body just can't tolerate that anymore. And then, of course, things like sleep, perhaps we're waking up because of pain, and that ultimately can impact our mood, right? So when we think about the anatomy of a joint, this is a basic kind of picture. So let's look at how osteoarthritis can change a joint. So in the joint here on the left-hand side, we can see that there is this nice pink material that's covering the joint. This is called cartilage, okay? This nice pink thing here, cartilage. It's very smooth, it's got this contoured shape, and this basically allows the joint to move effortlessly and pain-free. And the ligaments and capsules and tendons and muscles allow this joint to bend in proper alignment, bend and straighten how they should, okay? If we look at now the joint on the right-hand side, we can see there's been some changes. So you can see that pink covering around the joint is now a lot less thick. It's looking quite thin. And you can see that the cartilage has actually become a little bit roughened. There's also some malalignment because of this sort of uneven shape in the joint shape, which can also affect how the ligament holds that bone in place. So the reason the shape of the joint changes is because of these extra bony growths called osteophytes. And these affect how much our joints can bend and straighten. And it can cause limitations of motion and ultimately impact our function. So let's take the hands as an example. If you started to notice some bony changes happening, it's actually extra bony growths because of the degeneration in the cartilage. So if we think of healthy cartilage, it's basically like a sponge. So when it's compressed, just like the sponge being squeezed, it sort of releases these impurities and water back into the bucket. And then when it comes back up, it absorbs everything from the synovial fluid. So this sort of exchange of loading and unloading, this is actually essential to healthy cartilage. And the only way this cycle of loading and unloading is fostered is through exercise. So that's something very interesting to keep in mind, right? We need this exchange to happen. So this exchange could be fostered by things such as walking, cycling, other gentle exercises, which we'll talk about. Cartilage itself has little or no nerve supply. So therefore, it's not the cartilage that's necessarily feeling the pain, but rather the areas around the joint that are feeling the pain. So here with a hand, this is what osteoarthritis might look like in our hand. So we're going to notice the changes in the red circles here. And as the cartilage changes, we can see this new bony growth that develops, and it deposits around the joints, making them enlarged, knobby sort of looking, versus this green here would be what our healthy joints look like. You can see that there's still a little bit of joint space there. So this would be an example of a knee. This would be an X-ray of the knee. And you can see here on this side, there's been a loss of cartilage. So there's less black space in between that joint. And between the bone ends, you can see here, they're sort of coming together. So just a quick note, osteoarthritis is a clinical diagnosis, which means it's better to base it off of your symptoms rather than an X-ray. Because something important is symptoms may present 10 to 15 years even before they show up on an X-ray. Okay, so, you know, sometimes it's not that it's too late, but oftentimes we might be feeling the pain and our imaging doesn't really show anything. And that's just because it's early. It's early to have an X-ray. So an X-ray may be important if we have a whole lot of pain. Maybe they're considering surgery or trying to rule out some other form of condition. So we always say better to base it off of your own symptoms rather than an X-ray or imaging. So why are we getting arthritis? Why is this happening? So there's a couple different risk factors. So we can divide these into things that we have control over and things that we can't control. So these are non-modifiable factors, things that we have no control over. Unfortunately, aging is the number one. So the number of people with osteoarthritis, it does increase as we get older. However, it's not the cause of osteoarthritis. We don't get it because we're aging, it's just a risk factor. It is more common after the ages of 45, okay? Our sex is another one. So they do find that postmenopausal women, we have a greater incidence of knee osteoarthritis than our male counterparts. They're not too sure why. Perhaps they theorize it could be the shape of a woman's body, how we distribute our own weight, perhaps hormonal changes, but they do find more knee arthritis in women. Heredity, so sometimes just the way we're born, our bone shape, our bone quality, this is just something that's heredity. So this typically though can be combated if we adopt a general healthy lifestyle, because just because a relative has arthritis doesn't always mean that we're gonna get it as well. And then finally, congenital. So this is like a difference in our anatomy, so anatomical differences, something called hip dysplasia or hypermobility syndrome. Sometimes these people have a higher percentage of hip osteoarthritis just based on the way that their bodies are shaped and formed. Now we think of factors that are modifiable, things that we do have a little bit of control over. So excessive weight, unfortunately, is a major risk factor for the development and progression of osteoarthritis in the hips and the knees. So weight can affect osteoarthritis through two mechanisms. One is loading, because there's just a sheer mechanical load, heavier weight on the joints, which might speed up breakdown of cartilage, unfortunately. And then there's this idea of inflammatory response or inflammatory mediators. We do find that excessive body fat can contribute to osteoarthritis because there's this pro-inflammatory enzyme that's just more present in people who have a higher body fat percentage. So that's another risk factor that we might be able to control. And then injury. So of course, not all injuries are preventable, but we do find that if people have suffered an injury, you're sort of more likely to develop osteoarthritis later on in life because it changes the way we shock absorb, let's say for our knees and our hips as an example. So, typically if we can adopt a very safe work practice or activity practices, we can help distribute load a little bit better. Muscle weakness, if we are stronger muscles, the muscles help to absorb the shock of a joint rather than just the joint itself. So initially, many years ago, they used to think that we had weak muscles because of osteoarthritis, but we find that if we have stronger muscles, it can actually prevent further damage and degeneration of the bones of the joints, which is very, very good to know. And then finally, physical inactivity. So this is necessary for that cartilage to regenerate properly. So dynamic loading, so just a basic example like walking, is necessary for our cells to produce new building blocks required to make new cartilage. So this physical activity provides this dynamic load required to essentially feed the cartilage and maintain our bone health. And of course, physical activity is just in general vital for weight management, which we know now is a modifiable risk factor for osteoarthritis. So that's just a basic understanding of what arthritis is. And now let's talk about some tips we can use to manage pain and stiffness. So we know that using medication, it may help decrease symptoms short term, but unfortunately long term, it can't do anything to slow the damage to the joints. And also we know some medications can have adverse side effects, okay? So we have been finding with research that a suitable exercise program combined with weight management is the best at slowing the progression of osteoarthritis symptoms, reducing pain, and improving our day-to-day function. So medication may enable us to sort of be able to do more if it's a matter of controlling the pain. But of course, we need to be careful not to mask the pain that certain activities might cause. So you will see later in this talk that pain sometimes is an important warning sign for us to modify an activity, okay? And so if we think about some general supplements, this is some things that are sort of floating around. So it's always important to speak to your pharmacist, speak to your doctor before trying any different sort of supplements or medications. So something to keep in mind, just because something says natural, it doesn't always necessarily mean that it's safe. Some of these products contain lots of chemicals and they may have adverse side effects with a medication you're already taking or different diseases that you already present with. So this whole supplement industry, it's not regulated yet. So there's difference in brands, difference in products. So just be very careful and mindful if you are supplementing with anything. Typically things like omega-3 and vitamin D supplements, typically those are generally safe and generally recommended. We know that vitamin D is pretty essential for us living in Canada. We don't get enough sun, unfortunately. So vitamin D might be something safe to supplement with, as well as this omega-3. Glucosamine and chondroitin are sort of trends right now that people are taking. However, the research is mixed. It's sort of limited, not a whole lot of evidence. And similarly, people always ask me about turmeric or curcumin. And again, this whole idea is that it's not researched yet. We can't say for sure if it makes a difference. Some people find it makes a very big difference. Other people find it makes no difference. So just something to keep in mind, cost benefit here. So heat, we don't actually use this enough. So let's think about using this a little bit more in our day. This is very helpful for short-term stiffness and pain. As long as there's no excessive swelling, numbness, or tingling, we do find that moist heat, it has been shown to be more effective than dry heat. So for example, hot water, microwavable sort of gel packs or bean bags, fancier paraffin wax machines can be helpful. Some people, I'm one of them, I find cold a little bit more helpful for certain joints. And again, if you've got any sort of swelling or a joint is hot, it's swollen, you would want to use cold in that case to reduce the inflammation, okay? So next, studies have shown that therapeutic exercise or physical activity is as good or better than anti-inflammatories or Tylenol for pain. So regular exercise, something to keep in mind, very common kind of concerns. This is not going to damage your joints or cause additional damage if we do it correctly. Okay, of course, exercise has a minimal risk of side effects, and there's so many numerous positive benefits. And we know from the previous slides that living a sedentary lifestyle is a known risk factor for the development of osteoarthritis and worsening of symptoms. Okay, so why should we be active? This is a non-exhaustive list of all the reasons. Most people, you're probably already aware of some of the long-term benefits of regular aerobic physical activity for general health. Something interesting. 90% of people, so 90% of people over the age of 65, they unfortunately have at least one other chronic disease. So whether that is osteoporosis, cancer, a mental health issue, high blood pressure, diabetes, a lot present with another type of condition. Typically, with any of these conditions, exercise is going to be one of the #1 things that's recommended to you. So can we think of one pill that can do all of that for all of our conditions, right? So people with osteoarthritis who are active, the research shows, the big one, we have less pain than those who are inactive. This sometimes eliminates the need to take pain medications altogether. And this is because there's a natural endorphin, there's a natural high that we get when we exercise. If we think about sleep, exercise is one of the best ways to improve our sleep, which may be one of the symptoms of your osteoarthritis. If we sleep better, we have more energy and our pain will be less because of this. We know it's also a great way to improve our mood. So if we are, especially during this pandemic, many of us are feeling a little bit lower energy, a little bit lower mood. It's been a really difficult couple years. So we know that exercise can improve our mood because again, of this sort of natural high. And then of course it's fun. It helps us lose weight if that's a goal, and it can increase our energy levels. So something interesting, physical activity and exercise are not the same things, okay? Both are beneficial, but there's a difference. So if we think about physical activity, this is sort of any activity that's just done as part of our day, any body movement. So, leisure, recreation, household tasks, standing, waiting for the groceries in the grocery line, these are all just general day-to-day tasks that are physically active. Therapeutic exercise is different. This is a type of exercise that's planned, it's structured, and it's repetitive, okay? And it aims to improve one or more components of physical fitness. And it's done with concentration, it's done with mindfulness, and it's done with proper awareness of our posture and body alignment. So some people say to me, well, I go to the groceries, I cook dinner, I do my gardening, and one day that might be like enough, but we also need therapeutic exercise. We need both. So there are 4 main categories: strengthening, aerobic exercise, balance, and flexibility. And again, many of these everyday physical components involve all 4 of these things. So these are just some examples that might hit all categories. So yoga is a great example. Walking, we can use walking poles as well, which increases sort of our cardiovascular innate engagement. Aquafit, biking, Tai Chi. So these are just some examples of physical activities that will hit all your components, the component of balance, the component of strength, stretching, and aerobic. So if you're looking for more bang for your buck, think about maybe doing one of these 5 exercises: walking, poles, aquafit, cycling, yoga, or Tai Chi. Okay, so something that's a major component is weight management. So this is an important strategy in controlling symptoms, particularly with those of us who have hip issues, knee issues, or back pain. Small changes can make a big difference, okay? So if you are overweight, if you lost just a single pound, just 1 pound, and then you went and walked a mile, per mile walked, that's 4,800 less pounds of pressure on your knees and 3,600 pounds less pressure on your hips. If you lost 10 pounds, that's 48,000 pounds of less pressure on your knees and 36,000 pounds less pressure on our hips. That is astronomical. For many of us, if we are going out for a walk, likely the walk is about 5 minutes or more typically. Okay, so we might be hitting that mile before we know it. And think about, if weight is an issue, small changes in our weight can make a huge difference in that mechanical load on our knees and our hips. An extra push for this is studies show that if we lose 11 pounds, it reduced the need for a joint replacement, so a replacement for your hip or knee, by about 25%. In February of 2019, Canada's new food guide was pictured and released here. This was just highlighting sort of a more plant-based approach and the importance of maximizing healthy heart foods and minimizing excessive sugars. So they talk a lot about this Mediterranean diet. And what they mean by this is having every meal feature some sort of fruit, some sort of vegetable, and thinking about our sort of whole grain type of carbs. So whether that's whole grain pastas or rices or legumes, and it's difficult because if we're used to eating certain foods, this might not be something very realistic for a lot of us, but we can think about our portion sizes. So if we're, I love cooking stir fries, my favorite type of dinner. So I eat a lot of white rice, and I'm not switching to brown rice. I want to keep the white rice because I love it. I just need to monitor the portion size. So we say about a fistful. It could be a generous fistful, but about a fistful would be sort of a good portion size if we're sticking with the white carbohydrates. So this is just kind of an idea of this Mediterranean heart healthy foods. Okay, so according to the most recent research and studies to date, these modalities have been evaluated and they've been found to have short-term benefit, but not a whole lot of long-term benefit. So we need more research to show if these treatments are useful in the long run, but we still sometimes recommend these things because if we can get short-term relief in pain, maybe that accumulates over time to big changes. So for example, mobilization maybe would be done by a physiotherapist or a chiropractor, massage therapy. Of course, these are going to give you some nice short-term benefits, short-term release. And then there's other things like a TENS machine, which is your classic Dr. Ho machine, laser or ultrasound, acupuncture or dry needling, and electromagnetic therapy. So again, all these are sort of in the short-term realm of benefits. So of course, this is sort of a cost benefit thing. If you're finding you're getting benefit from it, maybe we kind of have this be part of our treatment. And if you're not getting benefit, then eliminate it because the cost of these things can add up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we can live better with our knees, our hips, and our hands. So this is a very key thing. This is about joint protection. So we need to think about pacing our activities, okay? So we want to think about breaking up activities into shorter periods of time instead of one long period of time, because this might enable us to complete the activity better and with less pain. So for example, it's the summertime. So people say to me, I love gardening. It's one of my favorite things. But then when they come back from gardening, they're in a whole bunch of pain. So we say, instead of doing an hour long of gardening, could you try to break it up into 20-minute periods? So maybe you do 20 minutes followed by a 5-minute break, 20 minutes, 5-minute break, and so on. Pacing is one of the #1 strategies to get you back to doing the things you want to do. So another example is a lot of my clients say they really enjoy cooking, but now they're finding it hard to stand in the kitchen and use their hands so much for these kind of things. And so if we can think about pacing, maybe we can do it. So maybe we do a bit of the meal prep the day before, right? The grocery shopping 2 days before. And then that day when we're cooking, things are already chopped up, or we can get a stool. We don't need to stand for so long. So thinking about getting creative with these type of breaks. Changing the method and alternating sit and stand. So if we can give the hips and knees a break when we have to stand for so long, that can help too. So maybe you take one of your chairs, you kind of bring it into your kitchen. So it allows you to sort of alternate between sitting and standing. And then maybe we can use devices. So we'll talk a little bit more about assistive devices, but think about, wider handled things that are better for our grip, or things that don't make us bend down so much, anything that's longer handled. We say, don't wait until you need it, right? We say, get things now so you avoid this frustration and you want to avoid this sort of prolonged pain. Assistive devices can be really helpful for a lot of us. Okay, so footwear, very, very key and often overlooked. So supportive, proper fitting footwear is always helpful. And I want you to think to yourself, is there a shoe that you have that makes a difference in your symptoms or that makes it worse? So I know when I go, when I'm a wedding guest and you've got to wear the high heels, I know that's no good for me. My knees, my back, everything will be hurting. So I choose a different pair of shoes. So think of the types of shoes that make a difference. Supportive shoes are needed because it optimizes the alignment of your foot, your ankle, and then your knees and your hips, and then your spine, your back. So the most important time to use supportive shoes is when you're on your feet longer than 5 minutes. Okay, so for example, if you are walking to the grocery store, or if you are walking from the car to a doctor's appointment, that's more than 5 minutes in total of standing and walking. Think about wearing a good pair of supportive shoe. So of course, it's beneficial to wear a shoe with as much of these characteristics as possible. So for example, this would have a very nice arch support. We can see there's sort of a soft top, sort of like a lace soft top. So if we've got any foot issues, any bunions, it gives our foot space to breathe and room for the toes to wiggle. Typically, there's a bit of a deep heel here, so our ankle has a little bit of support as well. And then on the inside, there's usually some sort of like cushion type of sole or memory foam that might help a little bit with some of the shock absorbing. Okay. And, of course, in Canada, we might be having to wear a little bit more winter boots in the summer. So try to think about some of these characteristics the next time you are in the market for a new pair of shoes. Orthotics are very helpful at times. So these can be off the shelf, things that you can buy from a store, or it can be a custom orthotic. Custom orthotics are very, very expensive. So I say to people, start first with a prefab, something you can buy from Shoppers or a running store. Try that first. If it makes a difference, then maybe you can get an assessment for a custom orthotic. So a lot of us have a flat arch. And so when we wear an orthotic, it basically helps to realign the foot, which would improve the body mechanics of our ankles and then subsequently knees and hips and so on. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. Now, before people run away and get mad, sometimes if we walk with a gait aid, it can improve our mobility. It can improve our pain. So a lot of people with osteoarthritis might start walking with a bit of a limp, whether it's because our knee is hurting or our hip or our back. But the results of walking with a limp results in more pain and weak muscles and unstable joints, and also a bad habit to get into as well. So when we walk without proper alignment, we do put more stress on the joints, and this causes more weakness, right? So let's think about a cane. This may be beneficial because it's going to reduce the load on a sore joint. Okay, it's also going to improve a little bit of the alignment, help a bit with balance, and just kind of overall gait pattern. Something to keep in mind is the cane will always go on the opposite side of the sore joint. That's a common question. So for example, if you have a bad right knee, you're going to put the cane on your left side. Okay, if you've got a bad left hip, you put the cane on the right side. So always opposite of the sore joint. If you're not about using a cane, think about getting a pair of walking poles. These are fabulous. We love walking poles. So this is going to give you added support because you are going to get to offload a little bit of weight through the upper body and through your hands. And it's going to get that heart rate pumping up a little bit more. And again, sort of offloading from the spine, hips, knees, and feet. And then finally, perhaps a walker is needed, which might allow us to walk with a little bit more upright posture, a little bit more balance, and an opportunity to go from sit to stand to take a bit of breaks. Okay. Knee braces can also be helpful for people who have unstable knee joints. So lots of different varieties of models with varying support. So a lot of the stores nowadays that sell these, so for example, Wellwise is the medical section of Shoppers. So there's a couple different Wellwise locations. They would sell a variety of knee braces, and the workers in there are actually not, they're pretty knowledgeable with different brands, different types. So you can always consult somebody before making a purchase as to which knee brace might be good for you. And always something to try, especially if you've got an unstable knee joint or a knee joint when you're going up the stairs that feels like it's collapsing or hurting a lot. This can come in handy. So with devices, you don't need devices, if you can manage without them, but we need to think about what does need mean. So if there's an activity that you can't do because it's causing frustration or more pain, assistive devices can be helpful. So let's think about raising our seats, making it easier to get up and down from a seated position. So this male gentleman here, he's using something called a wedge cushion. And basically this cushion he's just put on his dining room chair, which gives him a little bit of a lift. And you can see here that his knees and his hips are already sitting up a little bit higher. So when he finally goes to take a stand, he's not going to be as stiff and as sore when he takes that first stand up from a chair. If bending down is an issue, so if you can't bend down anymore to put your socks on, to tie your shoelaces, raise it up to you. So you can get a little step stool that's going to make it easier for you to bend down and to reach your feet. And similarly, things like raised toilet seats, if it's very difficult to get up and down from that toilet, a raised toilet seat, even though not the most aesthetically pleasing, can be really helpful if that's becoming a bit of a challenge for us. Okay, let's talk now about hand arthritis, because joint protection here is an important principle for reducing arthritis pain and not adding more stress to an already painful joint. So because of the anatomy of the joint at the base of the thumb, using something called a lateral pinch, which is thumb to index finger, something we kind of do regularly, this puts 12 pounds of pressure extra at the base of the thumb. So you can understand how the impact on an already damaged joint, how this might play out. Much of how we use our hands in our day requires pinching. So if we can learn another way to pinch things, this is going to avoid force on that already damaged joint. So it's something to just try, but if you do have to pinch or grip something in with your 4 fingers, try to do it with this O or C shape positioned here with this green check mark, okay? It takes a little bit of a practice, and you might not be so strong in it at first, but it's a good way to retrain yourself to regain a little bit of thumb muscle when we pick something up with this O or C shape. And it looks fun too when you pick something up this way. Osteoarthritis pain and damage, of course, can lead to reduced function. And decreased function is one of the leading reasons why people with osteoarthritis have a reduction in their quality of life. So even if you're not experiencing pain, think about adopting some of these strategies now so you can get a head start, so you can reduce unnecessary strain and stress on the joints to improve your function. So let's go through them. So this might be an example of changing the method on how we do things. So use two hands always, right? When we use two hands, we're now evenly distributing force, and we're not putting more pressure on one hand than we need to do. Think about, avoiding anything that has to be a strong pinch or a strong grip. So for example, if we can, with our books, let's think about laying it open flat with our hands rather than holding it open with our forefingers. So if we think about that pinch grip, if we're reading in bed or we're reading on the couch, if I'm holding a book like this for, let's say I'm reading for 30 minutes, that's a lot of pressure and strain on my hands. So we like the example of propping a bunch of pillows up and then having the book open flat with the palm of your hands like this picture, okay? Static holding something for a long period of time, it increases the tension in the muscles, which contribute more to pain and stiffness. So think about changing positions often and stretching the joints often. Phones and iPads. So we're in a generation where we are using a lot more tablets, a lot more devices. So with our phones, if we think about it, we're on our phones holding them, prolonged holding, and then we're texting like this. So this is our poor thumbs. We've seen more thumb issues in the last 5 years than ever before. And it's really, I think, tied to the thumb use. So if we do have to text, could we think about using voice command? Could we think about sliding or just, calling instead of texting, right? So it just being mindful of the extra pressure. If you love playing cards or bridge and holding the cards has become an issue, there's great card holders we can buy that do the holding for us. Again, less strain and stress in the long run, okay? So the key message here is don't wait until you can't do it anymore, right? See these kind of devices as tools to enable your independence now and to reduce unnecessary strain for the future, okay? Other things, non-slip grips. Non-slippery items, much easier to grip than slippery ones. So, this is an example of a universal non-slip doorknob, if sort of twisting the doorknob has become a bit of an issue. You also could take a bunch of elastic bands and wrap a bunch of elastic bands over the doorknob. So again, it kind of creates this non-slip surface. If writing has become a bit of an issue, you can get these pen grips, which basically make it a little bit wider for us to write, things that we used maybe in our school days, right? It might take that, see that OC shape I can obtain when I've got my, my pen grip on. So think of these kind of things. Larger grips evenly distribute forces on the hands. So there's something called foam tubing, which sometimes we have just lying around the house, or you can buy it from pretty much anywhere. So there's different grips that make it wider handled, non-slip, which is going to reduce the strain on those hands. And then we can kind of take advantage of battery or electric devices. So this is called the Robo Twist. It's a robotic jar opener. This might be kind of a case scenario if we live alone and we don't have someone to help us open something. You just press that green button and it automatically opens the jar for you. Things like food processors or magic bullets can reduce the need to chop some hard vegetables. Electric can openers can be great instead of the manual twisting ones. And then compression, okay? So some people find compression gloves very effective for decreasing swelling and pain. Just a precaution if you've got circulation issues or something called Raynaud's or skin lesions, of course, that might be the only contraindication. And make sure to just check your circulation to make sure something's not too tight, no numbness or tingling. So lots of different brands of compression gloves with varying degrees of tension. So you can always think of these. If you're waking up in the morning with very stiff hands, compression gloves could be an idea for you to wear. And then splints, finally. So this is another form of joint protection. Thumb splints can be really helpful in managing pain while performing any daily task. And they're sort of different ones with different degrees of support. So this might be best to speak to an individual therapist if you are having any sort of hand pain. They can make recommendations on kind of which splints might be best for you. Splints can support just one joint. They can support a few joints. So for example, this one just supports the base of the thumb, whereas this bulkier one here is going to support our wrist and our thumb. And these are basically meant to be worn during stressful or painful activities to protect the joints and to decrease pain. So a perfect example, I'll just show you my thumb splint. It just looks like this. So this is not that supportive, but it's a very functional one. So I've got this strap that wraps kind of right around that painful part of my thumb. And I only wear this if I'm doing something that really hurts right here. So sometimes when I'm cleaning and I'm doing this motion, it might aggravate a bit of my thumb. So I'll pop on my splint. Sometimes if I'm blow drying my hair, that's another kind of motion that might aggravate my thumb. So I'll pop on my splint for those type of activities. So when you're doing something that's aggravating you. So we finish off with this quote. If you always do what you always did, you will always get what you always got, and you're always going to feel how you always felt. So this just sort of speaks to behavior change. If we don't try some of these things, or if we stick to what we've just been doing and nothing's been changing with our pain, let's think about what we could add. How could we make a singular change? And I hope there's some idea in this presentation to help you live better with your arthritis. And so this, of course, being an hour-long presentation is just the start. There's so much more to learn. There's so much more information, specific exercises, specific type of assistive devices. So I do encourage you to get further with it, get deeper with your learning. The website does have an extensive amount of information with different types of learnings you can do. So for example, there's online learning modules. So you could pick any topic. We've got pretty much a webinar on anything. So if you want more information on managing pain or eating or fatigue, so many different webinars for that. And then specific workshops, we kind of offer ones on everything. So sleep, mindfulness, and then specific joints. So foot, spine, hips and knees, as well as the hands. So we basically go through it this way. Very, very easy to do any of the workshops. You can register yourself online, or you can call this number, and I'll leave this number up for just a second, the 1-800-321-1433 number with extension 3307. That number takes you to our client service coordinators or our administrative assistants, and they can book you into any workshop that you want to do. And they run pretty regularly. They're over Zoom, so similar platform to this. They run, I'd say pretty much weekly. We have some sort of webinar ongoing that you can join at any time. And then if you feel you want to speak to an individual therapist, whether it's you want more specifics on exercises or you want recommendations on assistive devices or a hand splint, call that same number and you can self-refer. So you don't even need a doctor's note. You don't even need a doctor's referral form. You can just call yourself as long as you've got an Ontario health card and refer to any of us. We also have social workers on our team as well. So if it's something more you want to speak to about the emotional impact that arthritis is having on you, you can speak to a social worker as well. Okay, so we have time for questions. And And what I'm going to do, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. So is it okay for us to facilitate the questions?
Sure, yes.
Okay, you wanted to do something specific?
Oh, no, I was just going to say I usually do the ones in the chat first and then kind of open it up.
So we have a different method to it.
Sure, you go for it, no problem.
Okay, so Keiko, could you stop the recording?